Today we're going to talk about the emergency fund. So this is one of those areas that, again, critical, and I say that about everything we talk about, everything's critical, okay? But the emergency fund really is such an important piece of your foundation on your path to financial freedom.
That's right.
Okay, so if you've done a financial plan with us, you have your trail map. We encourage you to pull it out, and you'll see where you're at with regard to your emergency fund in your specific situation. And you'll see it's right there in the foundation column, okay, as you can see on the slide. It's going to be the second item down, labeled emergency reserve, okay? If you haven't done a financial plan with us or have a trail map with us, that's okay. We'll explain how to establish an adequate emergency fund for your circumstance. So you'll be able to still calculate that and where you should probably put it and all that. But of course, we're going to welcome you to contact us, and so we can actually walk you through creating your own trail map. Okay, so the emergency fund. What is an emergency fund? An emergency fund is an amount of money set aside to cover unexpected expenses, okay, in case of an emergency. Okay, now here's the thing. It's not an investment. It needs to be liquid, readily available for when you need it, for when an emergency happens. This is one of the snafus, and I'm gonna, disclaim right now, a lot of people don't like having emergency funds because they're saying, well, it's not earning any interest, it's not earning any money. It's okay. The purpose of this piece of your portfolio is not to earn money, but it's to protect you when emergencies arise.
Yeah, but Jason, Paul, I want to invest that money. It's not earning anything. And we get that question all the time. And,
Yes.
and it's, we like the spirit of trying to invest and grow, but this is really protecting you so your investments can grow.
That's exactly
and
right.
so you don't go deeper in debt, and so you can avoid having to start all over again.
That's exactly right. Now, understand, this particular bucket of money is intended for unexpected expenses. It is not intended for expected expenses.
That's right.
Okay, so if you're going to have a vacation, okay,
Right.
you budget for that.
Yeah, it's definitely not an emergency.
Yeah, that's not an emergency. That's planned, and you can plan for that. So we want to make a distinction that when you have an emergency fund, it is truly for that. Sometimes it's better just to have it in a separate place, aside from your savings and checking account, and have it exclusively for that, so it's ready and available for when you need it.
That's right.
Does that make sense? So why is this important? Because let's face it, life happens. And unexpected things will happen to you, and this is a good way to be prepared for that.
A job loss, you can get sick,
That's
you can
right.
get injured. They happen all the time. Roof breaks, car breaks.
That's exactly right.
It's part of life.
It's part of life.
It will happen.
That's right. So an emergency fund absorbs the financial impact from any of these unforeseen events, okay? And in addition to that, it lowers the risk of you incurring more debt in order to, by either, or liquidating investments at a bad time or some other type of assets, and in some cases even save you from bankruptcy. It's so sad. The statistics in this country show that the average American is living paycheck to paycheck and is one missing paycheck away from bankruptcy. Okay, so this is why this is so critical. If you haven't, and I'm not wishing ill will on anyone, but you probably know someone who has had a tough time, whether, again, job loss, downturn in the economy, illness, etc. And those that can really come out ahead on the other side of those that had an adequate emergency fund to coast them through the tough times.
Yep. I mean, it even helps you with your goals as well. It's because, I had a lot of debt at one stage of my life, and I didn't have an emergency fund, and I kept paying down the debt and making some progress, and all of a sudden the car broke. And then I had to put that in a credit card because I didn't have an emergency reserve, and my debt built right back up.
That's right.
And it was just this cycle that I could never pay down the debt, and it was really because part of it I didn't have an emergency reserve fund, and so every time something happened, I would just have to start over again.
That's exactly
right.
right.
So if you pause the paying off the debt, get that emergency reserve fund, which we're going to tell you about in a little bit, then it puts you in a position where if you're paying down your debt and your car breaks, you can just pay for that cash.
That's exactly
and then
right.
build that reserve back up and be ready to continue on.
So you experience the dangers of not having an emergency fund.
right.
Go through some of those.
Yeah, so basically, incurring new debt is one of the biggest ones. So, I mean, which is horrible because this is in a time frame in your life where you're either sick or you lost a job, and now not only are you having to deal with that, but you're having to deal with no money and not being able to pay for it, which means you're getting deeper into debt, which is causing even more stress. So that's a big piece of it.
And let's say you're not sick and you didn't lose a job, you just don't have any savings.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, your transmission went in your car.
That's right.
I've had that happen to me in the past.
too.
It was a couple of $1,000s to get
right.
that puppy fixed.
Yep.
if I don't have the savings, well, it's going to go on good old Uncle Visa.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, so sadly, we want to avoid that.
That's right. That's right. So you don't want to dip in your savings. You know, and the other big one, especially as you're building wealth, is that you go through a job loss in a bad time, a bad economy. That's
2008.
2008. That's usually when you lose your job, is in a bad economy. And now you're having to, you don't have an emergency reserves. Now you're having to pull from your 401k or your IRA or some retirement account when the market's down, which is not only selling when the markets are down, which is bad in itself, but you also have to pay the penalties a lot of time for taking that money out before you retire, and you're also having to pay the taxes on that. It's like a triple whammy.
That's right.
So, and it just causes just having an emergency reserve in place reduces a significant amount of stress.
Which not having it obviously causes financial stress.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. So, and it takes you longer to recover from a financial impact. We're trying to get you into a position where you don't have to start over.
That's right.
And that's, obviously bankruptcy is the big start over, and we're trying to keep people and avoid that from doing that.
That's right.
Now, obviously, the benefits are, which I went over, is not going into any new debt. You can keep with your plan. You don't have to start over. You can just keep going up. You can just take a pause, fix whatever issue it is. If you lost your job, you have your emergency reserves. It'll last you 3 to 6 months. You find that new job, and then you go back to build up your emergency reserve, and life continues on.
That's right.
Okay, and so you don't have to sell your investments when you're down. You keep that peace of mind, and it's a quicker recovery. So this is how, establishing an emergency fund, there's basically 2 phases, right? So there's one, your initial emergency reserve fund. So your initial, if you have debt, okay, so this is if you have consumer debt, okay, not talking about a mortgage, but credit cards, student loans, car loans. If you have that, if you have those types of debts, then you just want to have an initial emergency fund, okay? For most people, that's around $1,000.
Right.
But just to kind of be a little bit more exact, you take about 25% of your monthly living expenses, so after you calculate and as you've gone through our budgeting, our spending plan lesson, as you've calculated your living expenses, take about a quarter of that, okay, but no less than $500 and no more than $2,000. And you want to only have that in emergency reserves so that you can take the rest and pay down that debt as quickly as possible.
That's right.
It's not that we want you to have a small emergency reserve fund. That causes some anxiety, that causes some stress, as we talked about. We don't want that. But if you have an extra $10,000 that you can put to a credit card that's charging you 12 or 18% interest,
right,
that's going to help you progress in your path to financial freedom. And so you can get back to the point, once you pay off all that consumer debt, to building up your emergency reserves, the next level emergency reserve fund, which I'll get to in a second. So how do we establish your initial emergency reserve fund? So, for some people, this is a difficult first step. This is the first step where they're going to start to, have to kind of draw a line in the sand and just kind of say, okay, this is the start. I got to get this into place. I got to get that $1,000 saved up that I've never had, or that $2,000 saved up that I've never had, so that I can get started with everything else. But there's ways you can do that really quickly. Okay, I mean, you can stop temporarily, contributing to your 401k. And I said temporarily. Okay, we're not doing that forever,
right,
but we're going to do that for a short period of time so we can build that up. We're going to sell some things around the house. Go take a little inventory around your house and see what you can sell, whether it be eBay, Craigslist, OfferUp, all the different apps that there are these days. You can sell things on those to quickly, get some cash that you can use for emergency reserves. You can work overtime. You can work an extra job. You can cut unnecessary expenses. All those things get you a point where you can save up quicker so you can get that first amount of money set aside so that now you can start to really progress down your path to financial freedom.
We're an investment management firm, and we're telling people to stop contributing possibly to their retirement plan. What if there's a match? That's free money that I'm giving up.
I know it's hard. Here's the deal. A lot of this is emotional, okay? You should be ticked off that you're missing out on the match. We want that for a short period of time so that you get your emergency fund built up really quick and so that you can get out of that consumer debt that's just killing your financial future. So we don't want to do it for a long time. We're not saying, trust me, we want to get to the point where you can max out your retirement,
right,
not just do the match. But you have to take the key steps to get into a position where you can build wealth.
So once you have, okay, you've talked us through establishing an initial emergency reserve, you know, $1,000, $2,000, depending on your expenses. So I've gotten to the point where now I've paid off, I've done that, and I listened to the, which will come up soon, the paying off my debt video, okay, workshop, and I've been able to pay off my consumer debt. What comes after that? Because you said that was the initial, but it's not a full
That's right.
emergency reserve.
So once your consumer debt is paid off, then you want to save approximately 3 to 6 months of your living expenses, and it depends on your household income. So as you can see on this slide, if you're a 2-earner household and you both have about equal amount of pay, then you're looking for 3 months of your living expenses. If your living expenses total $5,000, you take 5,000 times 3, you need about $15,000 saved up.
$15,000 sitting where?
In like a savings account set aside where you're not going to touch it. It's for emergencies. It's not going to earn much money, but it's there to protect you and so that you can build wealth without having to start over.
What about CD?
So CD, I understand sometimes they earn a little bit more interest, but they're not liquid. You want that money liquid that you can get to in case of an emergency. And if you get in a CD, then you know it's harder to get to, and sometimes you have to pay penalties when you sell it, and it's locked up for a period of time. So you want it in just liquid savings.
Got it.
Okay. Like a money market or a savings account.
Okay.
So if you're a 2-earner family, and one of the earners earns substantially more than the other, then you want about 4 to 5 months of emergency reserves, okay? If you're a 1-earner family or you're a single person, then you want 6 months of emergency reserves.
Because when you have 2 earners, you can, if one person loses a job, that the other earnings income cushions a little
supplements
bit,
you for a little bit.
Supplements for a little bit. But if you're the only breadwinner in the family, whether you're married or household or single, okay, a lot more is riding on that income. You want to be able to buffer that for a little bit longer.
That's exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah, so just some examples here. You know, so the first scenario we talked about, equal income earners, then you want 3 months. The living expenses are $8,000. You take 8,000 times 3, that's $24,000. Okay. Another family, one spouse earns $7,500 a month, the other one earns $2,500 a month. Then you want about 4.5 months. So 8,000 times 4.5 is around 36,000. And then you have another family where you only have a 1-income family or earner, and you take their 8,000, multiply that by 6, and that's where you get the 48,000. So there's some examples.
Now here's where the emotion again becomes a challenge. For you to have $48,000 sitting earning nothing is not easy. We understand that. But again, we have seen it in over 20 years of doing this business, okay? We've seen it, how it's been so critical, how it's been so helpful and useful to people who have either been downsized, who've gotten ill, etc. When calamity happens, pandemics happen, whatever, we've seen it happen, that having that aside was just a lifesaver and kept them on their path to financial freedom.
Yeah, that's a big piece of just staying on track, not only being able to stay on track financially, but staying on track mentally.
That's right.
Having $48,000 sitting in the bank can allow you to get through when the market's tanking, and you're not as scared at that point.
That's right.
You don't like it, obviously, but you're not as scared. You can make it through that, and you don't sell when the market's down.
That's right. So the goal of the emergency fund is actually not to inhibit your growth, because it's not earning much, but it's actually to protect your wealth. And once your wealth is protected, now you know you're clearly on a path to financial freedom.
That's right. Now, just to throw out a couple caveats, especially if you're pregnant or you're in fear of losing a job. Maybe there is layoffs pending, and there's something coming where you think you're going to lose your job. In that point, it may be wise to keep a little bit more emergency reserve than just your initial emergency reserve, but just so you can get through that time if you're going through a pregnancy or you're going through a potential layoff. But once that fear is over and once things are fine, then you continue along your path.
Pregnancy and layoff job, because those are circumstances with some unknown variables.
That's right.
Okay, so I've had couples that come into the office and the plan was to continue working afterwards,
That's right.
okay, after having a baby, but then they decided that she would be a stay-at-home mom, and nothing wrong with that. But those are transitions, so it's always good to take that into account and give yourself a little extra buffer if you're just starting to build up an emergency fund and you're in one of those transition stages.
That's right.
So give us some best practices for implementing and maintaining an emergency fund.
So to maintain an emergency reserve fund, first of all, if you're able to pay off your consumer debt, remember you can keep your expenses really low. So if you could pay off your consumer debt first, while just having that initial emergency reserve fund, that'll allow you to then, like for example, if you had car loans and you had credit cards and you had a student loan and you're paying $1,000 a month combined between all of those to pay for those debts. Once those are paid off, that's $1,000 every month you can save.
That's right.
And so that can help you get to that, your fully funded emergency reserve fund, and then after that, you got $1,000 plus every month you can start saving and building into your investments.
And you stop paying interest, so technically it'll be a faster process, again, taking out the bad money from your portfolio, as we talked about in a previous video.
That's right. To keep the emergency reserves in a separate account, because if it's just in your checking account, I've been there, and the money's burning a hole in your pocket, you're thinking about a vacation, it's in your checking account, and you spend it on a vacation, so you want to keep it separate so you're not tempted to use that
there's
money.
a lot of high yield savings, high yield checking accounts now. Some of them are online banks, some of them are local banks. I don't want to endorse any institution on this video necessarily. Obviously, feel free to reach out to us if you have any, if you want a suggestion. We have several we can give you, but there's a lot of alternatives to just leaving the money not under your mattress, okay, and not in a box.
That's right.
Okay.
Unfortunately, right now, in at certain times throughout history, interest rates are low, and I would not expect to earn a lot on this money. If you can get a little bit, great, but the whole point of it is not to invest this money and have that money readily available.
That's right.
And you only want to use it for unexpected expenses, okay?
That's right.
Like Paul said earlier, plan out your vacations, start to save for those. Don't use your emergency reserves for a vacation. Another thing that people do a lot is they use your emergency reserves to put a down payment on a home. And definitely you shouldn't do that. That needs to be a separate savings to put a down payment in your home, because the first thing you do when you move in your home, 3 things need to be fixed. You need to buy new furniture, and then you don't have any emergency reserves, and then you put yourself in a difficult position.
Then it's not an emergency, it's a catastrophe.
That's right. And last thing here is, you're going to have emergencies that pop up, you're going to have transmissions that go out, you're going to have roofs that break, things like that are going to happen, and so you're going to use some of those emergency reserves. That's what they're there for. Okay, don't feel guilty about that. But soon as you've used that money for that emergency reserve, put it right back and replenish that, and then keep moving on with your plan.
That's right. So old proverb says, prepare the umbrella before it rains. The time to have an emergency fund is not once the emergency happens.
Yes.
Okay, it's to have it before. This way you will be ready for the emergency. We hope this helps, and we hope to see you soon.